real conversations, and some hard truths. Gangs, drugs, and guns. Giving a voice to those willing to sacrifice. We have stories that need to be told. We have lessons that need to be taught. Protect and serve. Welcome to The Quiet Professional.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Nathan Romas with you. Today, we're going to be focused on some national security issues. Lately, I've had quite a bit of talk about China on here recently, but we don't want to leave anyone out. So we're going to go over to the Middle East. And for that, I have Alan Treddenick on the program. Alan is the president and CEO of ATNOH Group. They are a global public safety and risk consultancy. Prior to founding the company, Alan spent 32 years with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. There, he was involved in extensive counterterrorism, human operations within Canada and abroad. Human, for anyone who doesn't know, is human intelligence, so kind of confidential informant source work. Upon retiring from government service, Alan joined BlackBerry's Government Relations Division and established a team to lead BlackBerry's strategic relationships with law enforcement, intelligence, and security agencies around the globe. And this pertained to matters in national security, sensitive criminal investigations, and other regulatory issues focused on lawful access and market access concerns. Welcome, Alan.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
Yes, as we were saying just before, you got quite an impressive bio. You've done a whole lot of education. You've been a part of numerous boards and committees. So I think we'll have a really good conversation going today. And as I was kind of alluding to, we've talked a lot about China, and we're going to maybe have a little more focus on the Middle East, because I guess that's where most of your career was spent. But I think we're going to end up wrapping everybody into the conversation anyways. But before we get there, can we start with you and tell us a bit about yourself and where you come from?
Oh, sure. Well, I was born and raised in Winnipeg, and being a prairie boy, I wanted to join the Mounted Police. So I did after university, and did my training at Depot in Regina. After Depot, I was posted to F Division, Saskatchewan, where I did my uniform work, general duties, highway patrol. After 5 years, I joined the security service. I was transferred into the security service just before it separated and became CSIS, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, in 1984. And that was after 3 royal commissions, predominantly the MacDonald Commission in the late 70s and early 80s over RCMP Security Service illegal activities. CSIS was created. I went to headquarters in the counterintelligence to begin with. Then was after Air India, I was transferred to the counterterrorism program, where I basically spent the rest of my career in counterterrorism, mostly in field operations, but 2 stints at headquarters in Ottawa.
Wow. Well,
then after that, it was BlackBerry out of the Middle East, and worked 6.5 years for BlackBerry, and then said, "Oh, this is getting boring. I want to go and do something else." So I set up my own consulting business in the risk side and public safety.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll start just kind of back. You're from Winnipeg.
Correct.
So I'm from Winnipeg as well. I think most of the people I've been connecting with lately are from there. It seems nobody from Winnipeg actually stays in Winnipeg.
That's what I always say. Yeah, it's a good place to be from.
Yeah.
No, it's a great place to grow up, and I just wanted to, like I said, I always wanted to be a police officer, and the RCMP was it. I wanted to join them, and that's what my focus was, and I did.
Well, so when you joined the RCMP, how many years did you do there before there was the split in CSIS and you went over?
So just about 5 years in total.
Okay. And what made you kind of decide, okay, I want to go on this path? And was it a seamless transition? Like they're like, you're already in, we're just going to put you over in this place.
So that's correct. Well, I'd always been interested. My degree is in political science, and I'd always been interested in this sort of area, or terrorism cases, which in the late 70s and early 80s was ongoing internationally and domestically. And because of my degree and my interest, the security service decided to take an interest in me. And when they separated in 1984, CSIS took everybody that wanted to go over from the RCMP security service and brought them into CSIS to start the organization. So my transfer came in just before that, and I just stayed with it.
Okay. So when you were in F Division, though, did you have anything that really led you into, I don't know, an interest in terrorism, though? Because it doesn't seem like there's a lot of that there. So
no, all my stuff was criminal related. It was general duties, the typical,
front line,
break-in enters, assaults, domestics, fighting on the weekends, that sort of stuff. No, it was the typical first responder helping people out and going to calls.
Okay. Well, can you talk a bit about the split to CSIS and then kind of your career path on that side of things? So what that kind of looked like and in all the years you spent there, and maybe even some of the work that you got into.
Okay, so the split happened, as I mentioned, after a number of royal commissions on the RCMP and on security and intelligence work in Canada. And the MacDonald Commission was focused on what they called the illegal activities of the RCMP security service, particularly during the FLQ crisis. That really, what it boils down to is they call it illegal activities, but it was because there was no legislative framework for the security service to work. It always worked under the Crown prerogative, including wiretaps, right? They were signed off by the minister in charge at the day. There was no judicial oversight and no legal framework for it. The creation of CSIS created that legal framework. But they also believed that they needed to take out security service or security intelligence work out of the law enforcement side, because security intelligence work is the threshold for investigations is a lot lower because it's proactive. So the investigations are to find the threats before they actually materialize. Whereas law enforcement, it's reactive generally and for prosecution purposes. So they have to collect evidence in a certain way that would be acceptable for use in prosecutions in the courts.
Mm-hmm.
In the intelligence side, that's not the case. The CSIS Act also created the judicial framework for warrants for any technical intercepts, et cetera, right? That would go before certain federal court judges, who would then see there'd be an affidavit done up, much like in the criminal side, but with less of a threshold. The threshold would meet what the CSIS Act called the threshold, as opposed to, say, the criminal code.
Okay.
So that's kind of where it started, and then CSIS. So CSIS was born as a security service, and it's really that's what its main job is. A security service similar to what people know as the MI5 in Britain.
Okay. That's actually an interesting point because I just had Scott McGregor on the program, and he was talking about the difference between intelligence and what they can share and how the intelligence is used by politicians as opposed to police and on the criminal side. And I think you see that a lot right now in the comments from all the politicians where they'll say, yeah, law enforcement is handling it. But law enforcement can't handle it because there's nothing to prove, or the chance of them proving something to the threshold that they need to meet is non-existent. But the intelligence is telling you, hey, there's a problem here, or the probability of there being a problem. So I think it shows a really nice, clear divide in the purpose of both sides of the house.
No, that's correct. And we could probably have a program over an hour long on just talking about this.
Yeah.
But what I will say, the issue for Canada is somewhat unique with Western services, in that the courts have decided, and I'll use the Stinchcombe case, that the disclosure to the defense is very broad, exceptionally broad.
Mm-hmm.
And the example I'll use here, which affects the sharing of information from intelligence services, which need to protect sources and methods at all costs. So that affects the sharing with law enforcement, who must disclose, or the Crown must disclose, all that information in a prosecution. So if CSIS develops the information, passes it to law enforcement then acts on it. When it goes to prosecution and disclosure, they've got to say the information came from CSIS. Defense counsel then is able to start trying to peel back the onion of the intelligence and bring it back into the service. What did the service know? What's the service's affidavit for any technical intercepts? Who are the sources that the service is using? What methods do they use, right? All of that needs to be protected. Now, we do have a regime under the Canada Evidence Act to do that, but it's very cumbersome, and it's not guaranteed to protect the sources and methods.
Yeah.
There's three things, right? The federal court a prosecution would start. Then, if they wanted to use classified information or the service information, the federal Justice Department would do an objection under the Canada Evidence Act, and it would have to move from that court up to the federal court to determine whether that information actually needs to be protected. And if it does need to be protected, then they'll say, no, you can't have that. Or they'll issue, there's three things, that's one. Two, they'll issue a summary of the information that can be passed to the defense.
Mm-hmm.
Or three is, no, all of that goes to the defense. And then if that happens, or one or two happens, what we've seen in the past is that criminal cases collapse. That's why we have problems prosecuting national security cases, both espionage and terrorism cases. It's very tough.
You don't want to run the risk.
And I'll give you just an example.
Yeah.
Exactly. You don't want to open that Pandora's box or identify sources or methods. So, give you an example in the UK. If MI5 develops through their sources and methods that person X is going to plant a bomb in one of the train stations on this date, around this date and this time, they pass that to the Met police. The police take that. They go to the police station or the train station. They see the individual. He goes and plants the bomb. They go and arrest him, defuse the bomb. They charge him. Goes to court. When it goes to court, how they learned the person X was going to the train station with a bomb is immaterial.
Yeah.
Unless the Crown or the defense knows or has some information that says that information was obtained illegally by the security services. Otherwise, because MI5 passed it to the police, the Crown in the UK is only obligated to go from when the police become engaged.
Oh, okay.
It's not doesn't go behind that.
I find even nowadays, everything that the police do is kind of on the table.
Exactly.
So even any interaction with some of these intelligence services could be subject to disclosure or somebody trying to, like you said, kind of peel back the onion. So it does put intelligence at quite a risk. And for whatever reason, the courts and I guess defense lawyers have been really successful in convincing the courts of this. But yeah, it's almost anything and everything is up for grabs, or at least you don't want to take the risk.
No, that's exactly right. And it boils down to the Supreme Court's Stinchcombe decision on disclosure. Yeah. And we need to figure out a way to fix that. Aside from, say, the intelligence services phoning Crime Stoppers or 222 tips.
Yeah.
I mean, if we did that, the police take that and then they can run with it and it stops the price.
Yeah.
The disclosure stops there. We got it on a tips line. And now, if we're a serious country, we don't want to be doing that, right? I mean, that doesn't make sense. We should be able to, an organization of the state, the intelligence or security services should be able to pass that to law enforcement in a controlled fashion that isn't put the sources and methods at jeopardy. Otherwise, that's why I say use tips or Crime Stoppers.
So do we have strong enough legislation to kind of take on these bigger cases like you were saying? When you look at like terrorism, you look at these transnational organized crime groups, right? Huge money laundering cases. You never see any of this in the news now. Nobody ever prosecutes any of these things. So is that kind of a failing of the legislation? Is it just it's tough because of only prior decisions? Where are we kind of falling down on this?
I think it's a combination of the legislation, its unintended consequences of Supreme Court decisions in the past, such as Stinchcombe. Nobody thought of how it would affect intelligence sharing, or proactive policing for that matter, intelligence-led policing that can be affected too. So it's partially that. It's investigations of that nature are typically expensive and time-consuming.
Mm-hmm.
So if we don't have enough resources, either law enforcement policing resources or Crown prosecutor resources, then priorities have to be made, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's a combination of all of it, and I think that the politicians need to, and probably led by Public Safety Canada, figure out a way of providing, and if it's new legislation, then so be it. Providing an effective and efficient way for intelligence services to provide law enforcement with the lead information.
Yeah.
With a guarantee of protecting sources and methods. I mean, the intelligence services in Canada are already, and I'll argue in the West, are the most have the most review and oversight. Now it's internal, it's not public for the most part, but the review bodies, they do get access to all of like CSIS, CSE, all the intelligence apparatus information files. They can interview sources if they want. They can interview handlers. They can interview analysts. They get to see all that information, right? Whereas the public doesn't.
Yeah.
So do we need all that sort of stuff to come into an open court? I'd say no, we don't.
Well, and it's funny how you're mentioning there about the resources. I mean, that's the biggest issue we run into on the front lines is I can put together a stellar case with all the evidence and everybody's, cooperative and stuff. It gets to Crown and they're just like, I just don't have time. And that's it. I don't have time to run a trial on that, So they'll throw things out. We see all kinds of things get thrown out. There was recently a murder that was tossed. I think it was the Jordan decision, and anything below that, assault with weapons and so on and so forth. One thing I wanted to ask too was just on the recruiting of sources. I just think of it in terms of what I do, like on the street. You build a relationship with people. Some sources you can build that relationship over years before they actually talk to you. Some are going to tell you something because they're about to get charged. For CSIS, though, I've never known them to be kind of out there, boots on the ground. So where does CSIS even get intelligence from? Do they have a hotline that you can call, or does someone volunteer?
So well, that does happen. Sure. They're called walk-ins in the intelligence business. So that happens. Yes, there is a phone number that people can call. But the service is out there developing networks, talking to people. They will even talk to frontline officers. I know I used to do that in Toronto, not just the Intelligence Bureau, but I'd be out talking to frontline officers who actually know their neighborhoods, et cetera, right? And sometimes they would be the ones to say, well, you should talk to so-and-so, or they'd make an introduction, or they'd have information. But it's all these networks that an investigator in CSIS would go out there and make on their own, right? So whether it's business, academic, in the community, immigrant groups, you name it. It's everybody. The pool is wide for the service, right? Depending on what area you're looking at, and there are many motivations of why a person will cooperate. What I used to call putting on the Team Canada jersey. And they can vary, as you said, from somebody who wants to get out of a criminal offense or get charges reduced to everywhere to revenge on
Mm-hmm.
another group member or an associate, or there are a lot of people who do it for the right reasons because they want to be good citizens. So they'll help. They just didn't, or they get caught up in things that they didn't think was going to happen, and they just want a way out. There's all sorts of reasons. Money isn't always one, but money is a huge factor in a lot of the motivation of sources. But
it's always nice to get some money.
yeah, I mean, it's other sources will identify existing sources will identify other potential sources, and the service talks to or can talk to anybody.
Okay.
Right. So they're out there. You just probably you're doing it discreetly and quietly, much like your podcast, The Quiet Professional.
Yeah.
They're out there doing their job, and we have had a lot of successes. Unfortunately, the Canadian public doesn't see those successes, and necessarily the only thing that usually comes forward are the failures or the controversies.
Well, and even on that, like I think one of the things that kind of is the most frustrating, especially on the law enforcement side, is how the justice system seems like it's just weaponized against normal, everyday civilians, where the bad guys, we go out and charge some bad guys with something, but the court system, or sorry, not the court system, but I'll say defense, somehow makes these cases that it's like, the government is just picking on the little guy, and you're like, I've never seen a normal everyday person who just goes to work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, get charged with something, and it's mainly, we can't seem to get anything through the court system, and it's super frustrating.
Well, I won't say it's weaponized against the normal citizenry, but I do think that it's a pendulum, right? And the courts have swung. Not just the courts, but the whole system has swung one way. It's more to the rehabilitation of offenders, civil liberties side of things, which is good. We need a balance, but I think it's moved way over to one side. It's got to come back to the middle a little bit. Give you an example on street checks.
Yeah.
Okay. In my day, the routine checks were effective, right? Not only for intelligence gathering, but you actually got the bad guys with carrying weapons or contraband on them and things like that. Now it's pretty hard to justify a street check.
Yes.
And the criminals all know this, and they take their chances and carry the weapons, etc. And now we've got a kind of rampant crime going on, violent crime.
Mm-hmm.
And that's compounded with the move to, what I call the catch and release program of bail. I think there needs to be a reverse onus for anybody that's arrested on a violent offense, especially a violent offense with a weapon. Tell us why you should be coming back into society before your court date.
Yeah.
Why this isn't bail should not be the default on violent offenses. And you called it weaponizing. I'll say it's a re-victimization of victims.
Yes, that too. Yeah.
What's happening is we put these people back out there and they'll victimize somebody else. And it's like, hey, why are we doing this? Like, no, you tell us why you can come out. Now, the property offenses and the financial crimes, okay, I get that. They're not, it's not a violent offense against another human being.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you mention that too, because I've had that discussion on here many times where there's all the complaints about who gets arrested the most in society, what demographics make up people in jail, or
Sure.
I was like, well, but they never say with that who calls us the most. And when you let these people out, anyone depending on race, age, religion, whatever it might be, you let them back out, they tend to go back to their own community. So you get called by the same people again. So you're always in that community.
So that's right. And way back I'll go back to the 70s and 80s, early 80s. There was a program of statistics that captured that, right? It was race-based statistics.
Yeah.
So it captured the offenses. What's been missing? And since that time, for various reasons, that fell out of favor, and nobody was allowed to collect those. Now we're back to collecting that again. Who's getting arrested the most, etc. The part that's missing in the statistics is, okay, so let's do calls for service. Let's do statistics on calls for service, area and race.
Yes.
Same as on the arrests, right? And then you can compare the two. But you can't just take one and then say the police are concentrating on one particular demographic.
Yeah, we're picking on people essentially.
When in fact all the calls are coming. That's right. All the calls are coming from, or the majority of calls are coming from that area, and that area is predominantly of that demographic. So, I would switch on the other side. If all the calls are coming in from, the more, I'll say, an affluent type of community in the city that's, basically homogeneous Caucasian. I'll just use Caucasian as an example here. If all the calls are coming in there, then that should be part of the statistics.
Yeah.
And those arrests and checks and everything should show the same sort of thing. If the calls are coming in there for service for the police, then those two statistics should marry up.
Yeah.
Right? It's not you're picking on one or the other. You're going to calls of service.
Yeah.
And I think if we got back to that, it would be, that's the evidence-based policing to me.
Well, and definitely some of those narratives make it a lot harder for both police and intelligence services to do their job. Maybe that kind of transition us into some stuff here on the intelligence. Just Canada in general. I kind of want to start a little bit broad and get your opinion on some things. But Canada in general, what are we failing on right now? Because you see, we're not part of the some discussions going on around the world. People aren't really including us necessarily in some intelligence groups, but you hear that we're kind of like a back door into the U.S. We're kind of seen as a little bit soft on crime, so people come here and can basically, I don't want to say run rampant, but yeah, it's pretty out of control. So where does Canada kind of fit in the global security of things? What are we doing good, and what are we not doing good?
Well, first of all, I'll say that Canada, the public traditionally has not had an interest in national security or national defense issues and public safety for the most part, until an incident happens. So if they don't have an interest, the politicians won't have an interest. And our politics have morphed into political parties pandering to the public so that they can get votes and maintain power or get power. They're not necessarily looking at what's good for the country, right? The long-term goal, whether you're in power or not, or will be in power, or you're going to be booted from power. It's what's the long-term goal here for the benefit of all of Canadians. So there hasn't been a really an awareness, and that's why this conversation started with basically around China and the foreign influence. That's been going on for decades, and it's not just China. There are other countries doing it. But China has become the poster child of foreign interference right now, mainly due to, the leaks, which I don't condone, but I understand the frustration. So it's the leaks, and it's the investigative work by journalists who have brought that to the forefront and started a conversation. Now, this conversation is bringing more awareness to the Canadian public of what's happening. So what we're missing in this whole thing, now we see we've been advocating, or a number of us have been advocating for a public commission on public inquiry on this foreign interference.
Yeah.
because it's gone past when it originally came up. I was all for, okay, never mind the special rapporteur. This should have gone right to the review agencies, because I've seen them in operation before, and they do their job, and they've got members of all parties on it, and they do a very good job of reviewing all of that stuff and reporting. So that's where it should have gone, but unfortunately, events moved faster than they could have become engaged in a meaningful way, and
Okay.
to the detriment of I'll call our democracy. So now we need a public inquiry.
Do you think that's going to happen, though?
I think it'll happen. I think last I saw, there seems to be an agreement now on the way forward. So I think that's probably now the devil's in the details of how it's going to take place and what it's going to cover. But I'm encouraged there. So we're going to start there. The next we need is a Foreign Agent Registration Act,
Mm-hmm.
and that would give tools to the intelligence, but law enforcement in particular, to counter foreign interference. And now I'm talking about clandestine foreign interference. I'm not talking about the lobbying efforts, because there's already a lobbyist registry.
Just for some of the listeners that might not be in the intelligence world or follow along in all the politics, but can you explain what the Foreign Agent Registry is, what it is, and what it'll do?
Okay, so similar to what the US has and Australia's implemented is if you're representing a foreign government or you're conducting activities on behalf of a foreign government, you need to register that, so that if you're putting forward articles to a paper, for a media outlet, in the past, what's happened, if your foreign governments would use individuals, and they could be well-known individuals, to write, they don't necessarily write the articles. They get the articles given to them, and then these articles are put in the paper, and then the public reads it, sees it's from this prominent Canadian, right?
Yeah.
And takes it like that, not knowing that the actual talking points are coming from a foreign government.
Okay.
So that individual should have been registered as doing business on behalf of this foreign government. That's what the Registration Act would cover.
Okay.
Individuals that are acting on behalf of a foreign government to promote foreign policies and objectives inside the Canadian government or bureaucracy. So we already have lobbying. So there's registered lobbyists, and that's the overt lobbying that goes on between, I'll use commercial organizations and politicians and government, the federal and provincial governments. So it's kind of the same thing, only this will cover not the legitimate lobbying, but which is required in a democratic process, but will cover the clandestine lobbying, when foreign governments want to hide that it's them that's trying to influence politicians or Canadian policy in some form. And they're using individuals or companies to do that. We need to have a registration act that says company X is working on behalf of country Y, right? So it's mainly transparency. If you have transparency, then it's a lot easier for Canadians to understand the talking points that are coming from individuals, or why the government's doing something, et cetera, right?
Well, and I guess so if you are found out to be not following these rules of the registry, then you're looking at getting kicked out of Canada.
Definitely. Kicked out of Canada, or you're prosecuted under the act. Like the Americans have a non-compliance regime, and Australians do too. So we should have the same thing. If you don't register, you're subject to criminal sanction.
So how much of the problem of foreign influence do you think this registry will actually solve? And I'm just thinking, when you look at social media and all the, say fake news, for lack of a better term,
right,
it's been bashed in my head the last few years. But when you look at all the news that's out there, and you never know the source of it. The people that are talking, everyone just gets in their own little loops of the algorithms. So how much of it is the agent registry going to solve, as opposed to all the other things going on out there? And I ask because I know the opposition party the Conservatives and a few of the others, they keep talking about this registry like it's maybe the end all be all.
Yeah, so it isn't the end all be all. It's another tool. It's a tool in the toolbox of law enforcement to be able to prosecute individuals that are in non-compliance. It's a tool for the intelligence agencies to use to say, okay, we need to look at this person X or company B because we believe they're in contravention of this Foreign Agent Registration Act. Would also potentially allow intelligence agencies to share the information with law enforcement. And so it's not a be-all and end-all. We're never going to stop foreign influence activities. I mean, that they go on, that's all part of human nature. It's what we need to do is shine a light on the clandestine activities so that the population has transparency.
Yeah.
And out of that is the journalists, right? The journalists, for the most part, will be the ones to be able to see this and then bring it forward to the Canadian public.
Well, even on that, so you mentioned the leaks before. So some stuff's been getting out to journalists, to media in general. My guess, and when I read some of this stuff, is it sounds like a lot of the intel community has put stuff forward and politicians just outright ignore it. Or when things do go wrong, the politicians start to blame the intel and law enforcement community, even though they say, like, I told you this how many times over how many years. But when someone gets to a point where they feel like maybe they haven't been heard, they've put things out there, where should people go? What would be your advice to the people who are leaking this stuff? Just keep trying. Like, I don't know what else you could do.
So there are mechanisms to move that stuff forward. The leaks damage our reputation with our allies.
Yeah.
It's never good when you see a security service or an intelligence agency leaking material like that. Now, having said that, I understand the frustration for exactly the reasons you suggested, that it seemed like nothing was happening. There are ways, there are channels for that to go forward up the line, but that's also something that the review agencies could have looked at, and then reported on in a quiet sort of way. It wouldn't be a public document.
Yeah.
Right? It would have gone to the government saying, hey, this is what's going on, and all parties are part of it. So that would have been, I think, the preferred course of action, rather than taking a lot of the stuff to public. But now, having gone public, that's why we need a what they used to call the Royal Commissions, but are now public inquiries with judicial powers, right? So that they can subpoena people and demand document production.
Okay.
And we need to clear the air on that, and a public inquiry will do that, or should do that. I've always advocated for, because one of the arguments has been, well, who are we going to get to lead it now? Nobody's going to touch this with a 10-foot pole after Johnson's reputation was destroyed.
Yeah.
I fall back on the MacDonald Commission. They had 3 commissioners. So I would do the same thing here. I would say, if I was Trudeau, I'd be going, okay, 3 commissioners. We have 2 retired judges, one that had been appointed to the bench by the Liberal government, one appointed to the bench by a Conservative government, and you have the commission chaired by a retired security professional who served both types of governments, and give them the full powers, and they can hear classified information, because that's another knock on these public inquiries is, well, they're not going to be able to talk about classified information. They don't have to talk about it. They'll hold those hearings in camera, and it'll be formed as part of the report, and there'll be 2 reports. One will be an unredacted report that will go to the government and Parliament. The other report will be the public report.
Okay.
And that'll be the one that everybody gets to read. So it's a similar as the MacDonald Commission. And we could do that easily, and it could have been done. It could have been done months ago.
Yeah.
And we're still dicking around with it.
Well, Do you think, and part of our, I guess, inability to be aggressive on these sorts of issues and hold people accountable, do you think that's part of the reason why you don't see, and this kind of transitioning to a different topic, but do you think that's why we don't see any large scale attacks here in Canada? And maybe just to frame that a bit was um, some of the prior conversations I've had on this program, people talk about us as like a backdoor into the US.
Mhm.
And maybe we don't see any large scale attacks here. Like, and you were saying the public isn't interested until they see something happening. So maybe we don't have the big attacks because nobody wants to draw attention to themselves. They see us as like, hey, you can just go and hang out there. Don't draw attention to yourself. We got an easy border to cross. We can do all these things in this, rich country, influence people. So we're just like that easy in.
So we're not as easy as it's portrayed. I mean, as I mentioned before, the service has had, and the RCMP have had a lot of success in the counterterrorism field and the counterespionage field. We work closely with our Five Eyes partners, especially the United States. And yes, you're right, we are seen as a soft underbelly to the U.S., similar to Mexico. For that reason, we have to have pretty robust security intelligence and the law enforcement, and for the most part, we do. And as I said, we've had some tremendous successes. Now, the successes are not always prosecutions. There are other things that we've done where the public will never see.
Yeah.
Why is Canada never attacked? That's part of the reason. The other part is some of the groups used to, and that's on the counterterrorism side, used to use Canada as a recruiting, fundraising. They would obtain material for support through Canada, and they didn't really want to. It's much like the bikers who won't dirty up their own little neighborhood.
Yeah.
So the terrorists kind of the same thing, and of course Canada wasn't really the number one target in their mind. It was the U.S. So I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's just there's been no interest in Canada as being why there's been no attacks. I mean, there has been the attempts, and we have had attacks here. Don't forget Air India. It was a Canadian terrorist act.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So we have had the attacks, but for the most part, from my experience during my career and what I've understood after that, is we've had some pretty good successes in the counterterrorism and espionage fields.
Okay.
That's all I can really say about that on as far as where Canada fits in the thing. Are we seen as a little weak? Yeah, I think so, because of it's a broader military, national defense, policy-wise, national security policies. This foreign interference doesn't help. This dithering that's been going on. So there's those elements that we need to correct and get back on track. And then I think we'll be back into the Five Eyes. And the other thing is we're on the intelligence side, we're a net importer of intelligence. For the Five Eyes. So what we need, and you've probably seen that before in my posts, etc., that I'm a proponent of a separate foreign intelligence organization in Canada that specifically on the human side. And because we do have CSIS can conduct foreign operations, and of course we've got the Canadian Security Establishment for signals intelligence. We've got Global Affairs, who does diplomatic intelligence, and other organizations that can gather all that, but we don't really have a dedicated clandestine human organization that can collect information from a Canadian perspective and on Canadian targets. Right now, we're beholden to our allies to provide us information that they want us to have.
Yeah.
Not necessarily everything that we want.
Do you think that's on the horizon?
Well, it's been talked about quite a bit. There's reticence to it. People say it'll be expensive. I don't think it has to be that expensive. It can be very small, as long as it's focused and nimble. And set up similar to what the Australians have, the Australian Secret Intelligence Service. They're a very small foreign intelligence gathering, but they're pretty effective where they are. So I think Canada could do the same, and then we could provide that value added so that we're not always just seen as a net intelligence importer, but we can export some of the intelligence, or a little more than what we do now.
Well, it seems like Australia kind of went through this similar stuff, a few years ago, and then now we're the ones going through it. So maybe we got to take a few pages out of their book.
We should certainly look at how they operate in this field. I mean, there's often a comparison between Australia and Canada in more ways than one, and I think that's right. The only difference being for Canada is that we're under we're right next to Big Brother, so it's like the mouse sleeping right next to the elephant, right?
Yeah.
We've been protected by the elephant since the Second World War. And I think we've just become complacent. And again, the public doesn't have much interest in these issues until an incident happens. When an incident happens, then you see public opinion mobilize, you see political will mobilize. Afghanistan was a good example of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like what keeps people motivated in all the quiet times, right? Like, how do you keep them interested in these things when nothing bad is going on, or at least, nothing, let's say, nationwide that people have to pay attention to. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about was, because a lot of the focus has been on China recently and Russia now, but who else is out there that's involved in all this? The foreign influence, and then has a kind of a position within, I don't know, say not terrorism necessarily, but maybe it is terrorism. I've heard that Canada has one of the largest Iranian diaspora, which I never knew. So what do you kind of see from your experience in the world, and who's a big player outside of China and Russia?
So Canada is an attractive location for people to come to from all over the world for various reasons. But one is because we're so nice,
yeah,
and because it's a great place to live, right? So they do, from time to time, there are elements of foreign diaspora that bring their conflicts here or continue to support conflicts from their own countries from which they fled. Now, that's what the security services job is to detect any threats in that sort of vein. So there are a lot of countries that have been mentioned in the past publicly. On India was one. Definitely Iran. In addition to Russia, China. I mean, it's any country that has a significant emigration to Canada will, if there are, I'll say, anti-regime elements moving to Canada as well, they will have an interest in infiltrating those groups and trying to interfere in their new locations in Canada, right? Interfere by influencing and identifying and keep monitoring. So that's part of the foreign interference part, is their monitoring of their own anti-regime elements. So it's really, can you say one country is worse than another? No, it's just the varying degrees of how much they interfere.
Okay. Well, what is I always wonder, though, with the Middle East, how much of an influence do they have on us over here in North America? I know everyone knows about oil, but outside of oil, what real impact do they have in the world?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. It's oil and energy, right? Is the most part, and that leads to a lot of money. So it then becomes commercial business interests, and then it just takes, they can influence in through those venues. But again, that's if it's business, and it's money, that'll be transparent.
Hmm.
So it's especially if we get legislation that identifies beneficial ownership. So once we have that, it's all about transparency in anything that's going on, especially involving foreign countries or foreign companies. If we have the transparency, then we can take mitigation measures if there's influence happening. It's when you can't see it.
Yeah.
That's the danger. And that's why all of a sudden China is now the poster child of this, is it was always going on. We just never saw it before. Well, the public never saw it before.
Yeah.
Now the public sees it. Now it's motivated. Now we're taking action, right? So if they had done it through companies legitimately and had beneficial ownership, we'd be able to see that. Kind of like what was happening with energy companies in the past, that Canadian energy companies were being bought up by Chinese companies, or mining companies that were being bought up. Well, that was all public.
Yeah.
But there was no, right? That it just never was realized as being maybe a bigger picture here, or by them, by the public. And that's why now we have this conversation going. The idea of countries conducting foreign influence operations in Canada has been amplified, so that now the Canadian public at least has visibility on this stuff now. The politicians are now forced to answer to it for somehow. And that's where it goes. It's all about transparency on all these activities.
I think even at least for, I'll say, North Americans, the Western world, we operate in such a short time frame, where you see China, they operate like they're playing 100-year game. And it's hard for people here to see that far in the future, or at least have that concept. And just a quick point on the Middle East, it's just funny talking about oil and energy, but once we all go to battery cars, I don't know what they're going to do. We're not going to be using oil, then they're going to be really screwed.
Well, Canada has a lot of the critical minerals, right? So maybe it's time for a Canadian government business to take a look at that and say, all right, how do we mine these? How do we bring these to market to compete with the other places that are maybe Chinese owned or influenced?
Yeah.
And get into the marketplace and start doing this. And that was part of what COVID showed us with the global supply chains are not always reliable when catastrophes happen.
Yeah.
And because countries will revert back to self-interest. And so, globalization was a great attempt. And there are some advantages to the globalization, but you also need domestic supply chains, or in this case, U.S. Canada supply chains, manufacturing and internal supply chains that can meet all the needs for when these things happen. But we also need to get everybody together, not just government and business, but say First Nations. Okay, how do we bring some of the wealth that's going to happen through the mining and oil and gas and green energy, all of that? How can we bring that wealth to you? How can you have input to help us, help Canada as one nation compete on the world stage and compete efficiently and effectively?
Yeah.
And we need to be able to do that. And right now we're not. We're fractured all over the place.
So it's kind of coming up to the end of our time here. I just want to make sure I get one of these last questions in. Your current group, the ATNOH Group. Can you tell us a bit about what you do? Because I went to your website. It sounds super secretive. So you tell people things about things. But what can you just explain for some people what you do and
sure,
who you work with?
Right. So there's a reason why there's not a whole lot on the website. We do a lot of things, but so what I will say is that we concentrate on global risk. So we concentrate on the small and medium size, and I prefer Canadian businesses to help them. And so global risk on reputation, legal, financial, and cyber risk that they may face. So say mergers and acquisitions or partnerships in that they want to partner up with a company in China, for instance, or Pakistan, or Kenya, or something like that. We can go and conduct due diligence investigations, and if there's any dirt to find, we'll find it, or if there isn't, we'll let them know. So we do risk, we do public safety engagement. So we'll help companies on the public safety side get into the in front of first responders, whether it's police, fire, or EMS, on equipment or software, or training. We also do that. We do training. We do capacity building in foreign countries in conjunction with partners. So ATNOH Group is really, we call it a BOG, a bunch of guys. It's basically a number of us from intelligence, law enforcement, military, and diplomatic and business backgrounds around the world that have our own networks. And we come together as needed or as required in whatever areas that we have the strengths in, and we bring those to bear. I mentioned we also do cyber, what I'll call cyber resilience. So there's cyber training, but we also have cyber investigation, cyber security platforms. And again, same thing. It's if there's a Canadian company, and I don't just do Canadian companies, but I try to help out the Canadian business scene, especially the small startups, the small and medium-sized businesses, and we'll help them on whatever they really need, and vice versa with the law enforcement, say, or EMS. They may come to us and say, "Do you have?" Which actually has happened with the Americans more so than in Canada. They will come and say, "Well, we're looking for a technology like this. Have you seen anything in your travels, or do you know of any company or individuals?" And we'll say, "Well, we might be able to do that." So what makes us different from a lot of other companies that do the risk is that we also conduct humans.
Okay.
So not only do we do open information, OSINT source collection and proprietary databases, we'll also do actual human operations against the targets to develop any or uncover any negative information. And if there isn't any, all the more better for the client. We can go back and with some confidence and say, "No, we didn't uncover anything."
So this, like, if a Canadian company says, "Hey, I want to do business in this region in the world," they can come to you, and you can say, "Hey, you think you're working with this company, but here's who it's owned by, and here's who's influencing things."
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's the due diligence. But we can also set the stage. We're partnered up with other, as I said, part of the BOG, where there are companies that do actual market intelligence analysis for.
Yeah.
So you want to go into a country X, they can tell you who's who in country X, who you should be talking to, and what the business climate is, and the pros and cons of doing business in that country. So that's what we do.
All right. Great. I want to make sure you get a chance to say how can people follow you in all your work?
Well, I basically on LinkedIn under my own name. The ATNOH Group does have a LinkedIn site as well. We are on Twitter. I don't know for how long on Twitter, but LinkedIn is usually pretty good. Most of the time, our engagement is done by word of mouth. It's done by referrals.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of advertising. We don't do a lot of blogs. You may see my stuff from time to time on LinkedIn, and that's probably about it.
Okay.
The odd time you'll see on publications. I mean, it's we were once quoted in the Intelligence Review, which is a European-based thing that does all sorts of security and intelligence reporting.
Mm-hmm.
And ATNOH Group was mentioned once, but they couldn't find out a lot about us either. So we were a shadowy Canadian intelligence, business intelligence group.
I'll throw up a few of the links when the episode goes up. It'll be in the description below. But I want to say thanks.
Sure. No, appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on today. Hang on for 2 seconds. I'll say bye offline. But yeah, really appreciate the time and educating us on a whole bunch of things.
Well, thanks for having me, and it's been a pleasure chatting with you. And you've got a great podcast going.
Oh, thank you.